you're going to bake 2 cakes, one today and one tomorrow, you can't bake today's cake with butter and eggs and tomorrow's cake with flour and sugar. Both cakes need all the right ingredients in just the right amounts at the time that they're being baked. And it works the same way for your muscles and the 9 essential amino acids.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Eat for Endurance podcast. My name is Claire Shorenstein and I'm a registered dietitian based in New York City. Today's episode was really fun to record. I got to chat with Dr. Art Zemach of Tailwind Nutrition. He's the Director of Research and Development over there. And if you're familiar with Tailwind's nutrition products, you may know that they have the Endurance Fuel product and the Rebuild Recovery drink. Well, Dr. Z, as his patients used to call him, he created that Rebuild Recovery drink, which is quite fantastic in my opinion. He is an endurance athlete himself. His passion is whitewater kayak racing, which I didn't even know existed until we chatted. Sounds amazing. And he also mountain bikes, trail runs, and does a variety of other sports. We had a really great discussion all about the science behind all sorts of sports nutrition principles, and we kind of used Tailwind products as, I guess you could say, a case study. So we talked about the more general principles in the context of these products. Of course, not everyone uses Tailwind, so even if you don't use Tailwind, I think you're really going to enjoy this discussion because we cover a lot of ground about electrolytes, carbs, fluids, the interplay between them all. We talk about being low carb, high fat a bit, since Art has kind of played around with that for himself. And of course, we talk about recovery. What is a complete protein? Why did they structure their products a particular way? So I think you're really going to enjoy this and learn a lot. I certainly did. So please enjoy my discussion with Art. Hey, Art, thanks for coming on the show.
Good morning, Claire. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I really wanted to have someone on from Tailwind Tailwind Nutrition, because I'm a huge fan of your products. I use them myself. My husband uses them. I'm part of the Tailwind Trailblazers. And after talking to Maggie, who also works at Tailwind, she recommended I speak to you because she characterized you as kind of like the mad scientist behind the company. Of course, your actual title is Director of Research and Development. You co-created the Rebuild Recovery drink. And I thought it would be really, really cool to have you on to talk about, the Endurance Fuel product and the Rebuild product, and then to generate a broader discussion about, all these great principles of sports nutrition that everyone always wants to know about, just electrolytes, carb intake, fueling for training and racing, protein for recovery, and all that good stuff. So I'm really excited to talk to you about all that and hear your take on it.
That sounds great.
Can you tell me a little bit about your background, both professionally and athletically?
Sure. I'm a pediatrician. I've been retired for a couple of years, and my retirement gig is I do research and development for Tailwind and help them invent new things. So they pay me to do science, so that's nice. And I like outdoor sports of almost any kind: trail running, mountain biking, skiing. My passion is whitewater kayak racing.
That sounds fascinating. Where do you do that mostly?
Right here in Durango.
Oh, cool.
For practice, probably paddle, probably about 6 days a week. And
Nice.
I'm old for the sport. It's a young person's sport. There are no age categories in it, but I love it enough that I just keep doing it.
Great. Awesome. When did you actually, first get into these various sports?
Our parents took us camping into the outdoors from, as soon as we could walk. And I think I've just always loved being outside. And there was just something about a long run or a ride in the mountains that just does it for me on a number of levels. Whether it's just enjoying the outdoors or pushing yourself, or that wonderful feeling that you get once you push your workout beyond about an hour. I just love outdoor sports.
Did you grow up in Colorado?
No, kind of all over the place. Born in California. Then our parents moved us to Washington, D.C., and then Switzerland, then Washington, D.C., and then New Mexico. And then I went to college in Los Angeles, and then moved to D.C., and then to Colorado, and then medical school in Colorado, my residency in Salt Lake City. And then after all of that moving around, finally settled in Durango, where I've been for 20-something years.
Oh, wow. Nice. Where in California were you born?
San Francisco.
Oh, nice. I was born in Santa Cruz. Well, born and raised.
Aha, yeah. No, my dad was a professor at Berkeley, and so that's what
Oh, wonderful. Okay,
got us there.
awesome. So talk to me. So you were, based in Durango for a long time. So I imagine, is that kind of how you connected to Jeff and Tailwind Nutrition, or how did you get connected to all of that?
Yeah, Jeff and I have been friends for a long time, and we mountain bike and trail run and do all kinds of stuff together. And when I retired, he asked me if I would help him design a recovery drink. At that time, Tailwind had one product, just called Tailwind. It's, the endurance fuel. I think our primary market is ultra runners and long distance athletes. And he wanted a recovery drink, something with protein in it, to help rebuild your muscles and help your body recover afterwards. And so sounded interesting. I said sure, and spent some time looking at the market. I think there were 7 or 8 recovery products out there at the time. And after a while, I just put all that away and ignored the industry and went back to the books and the literature and just said, the question I decided to answer is, what would a doctor do? How would a physician design a recovery drink? What does your body actually want and need after a workout to replenish its energy stores and rebuild its muscles and mitochondria, and how best to do that? So that's how I got started with Tailwind. I was just a consultant then, got rebuilds done and designed. That's a recovery drink, and it's been out for, I guess, coming up on 2 years. After a while, Jeff said, "Look, can I just hire you so you can more stuff?" Like, okay. And so that's how that happened.
And how long did it take to, to bring that product to market from the point at which Jeff said, "Hey, I want this product," and you're researching it, and then you produced it?
About a year.
Oh, that's not that long.
Well, I worked on it pretty hard, and it was an interesting journey. Ended up, I think we're going to get a patent. But one thing that was interesting for me is that you can do the best science in the world and just have the greatest product since sliced bread. And if there's no marketing department and sales structure to sell it, no one will ever hear of it.
Mm-hmm.
It was really nice for me to sort of merge with the Tailwind organization that, Tailwind, when Jeff started way back when, he started in his garage, and he and his wife, Jenny, have grown Tailwind to a multi-million-dollar organization that ships to 27 countries. And I think we have some 600 races and events that use our products as what they pass out.
Yeah. Well, so why don't we back up and talk a little bit about the Tailwind story. To my listeners, Jeff was actually supposed to be on this call, but he had to get pulled away last minute. So Art, you can speak to his whole story about how Tailwind got started and how you basically go from seeing a hole in the market with something that you want for yourself to building a multi-million-dollar company where it stands today. And just, a side note that, I don't normally really support specific products, but I do love Tailwind. I use the naked flavor of the endurance fuel is like my favorite, and that's why I joined the Trailblazers, and that's why I was so interested in using Tailwind almost as like a case study to talk about sports nutrition. But anyways, yeah, let's hear the story.
Yeah, sure. It's really Jeff's story, but I know it, and it's a good story. Jeff his passion is mountain biking, and one of his favorite events was the Leadville 100 mountain bike race, so 100 miles of mountain biking. And he's done that race at least 10 times. And he had a fair amount of trouble finding an endurance fuel that would work for him, that his stomach could tolerate. And he cycled through pretty much every product on the market, just really struggled finding something that would work for him for 100 miles. Eventually, he decided to just make his own. And he's a bright guy, went to Stanford, went to the books, and started learning about sports nutrition and began making his own drink in his kitchen. After a while, he and Jenny, his wife, decided that it was good enough they'd make a little business out of it. And that's how Tailwind started. So the hole in the market that Jeff was trying to fix in the beginning was a hole in what he needed to compete in the Leadville 100. On their website, they have this cute, well, I don't know if Jeff thinks it's cute, but Jenny does. There's a little video of him throwing up at the finish line.
Oh, gosh.
Just because he just could not tolerate some of the other products that were out there. What Tailwind ended up being is a very clean burning fuel that's extremely easy on your guts. We have athletes who do entire 100-mile ultra runs on pure Tailwind, and they do great.
Well, that's kind of the tagline, right? All you need all day really is what you have on the package, right?
Right.
And so what kind of testing goes into creating a product like this and just figuring out like the exact formulations? I'm looking at a stick pack right here. There's 200 calories. There's, 606 milligrams of sodium, 176 milligrams potassium, 50 grams of carbs, etc. Yeah, talk to me a little bit about what goes into creating a product like this, and we'll also do the same for Rebuild.
You've got 3 pretty complex problems that you need to solve and take care of during your run. Your hydration, your electrolytes, and your fueling. Those 3 areas can get pretty complex, and there's also interplay between them. So, your hydration affects your electrolytes, and your electrolytes affect your hydration. They can both affect the absorption of your fuel and vice versa. So at the end of the day, the reason Tailwind says on the package, all you need all day really is that's all been worked out so that you can just simplify your nutrition. Sip your Tailwind throughout the hour between 18 and 24 ounces, 500 or 710 mils per hour. And your hydration and electrolytes and fueling are all taken care of, and you don't have to overthink it.
You're saying that you guys came up with this specific formulation to really maximize the amount of electrolytes and fluids and carbs that can get into your cells, essentially. Is that correct?
Yes. If we're just talking about Tailwind, the endurance fuel, that has water and electrolytes and carbohydrate, no protein.
Yes, exactly.
I guess one example I could give of interplay is, when you pick a carbohydrate, most distance athletes have figured out that depending on, how much they weigh and how hot it is and what kind of effort output is happening, most people want somewhere between 200 and 300 calories per hour.
Mm-hmm. And why is that?
Because if you start to use less, it's not quite enough. And there's not much point in going beyond that because most people don't need much more beyond that. For example, for myself, if I put 2 scoops of Tailwind in a bottle I'm going to drink for an hour, so that's 200 calories. As the hours go by, I start to get a little hungry.
Yeah.
It's not quite enough for me. And that's how I experience that I really want some more calories, is I actually start to feel hungry. Whereas if I put 300 calories per hour in there, I don't.
Yeah.
Although if you're a light lady, say, I don't know, 110 pounds, 300 calories an hour might seem to be a little much for you.
Yeah.
And so some of it is, who are you? How hard are you running? How hard is the effort? How many hours? How hot is it? That type of stuff.
Of course. And of course, the duration of the event too, right? I mean, I know sports nutrition guidelines say 30 to 60 grams of carbs for, per hour for less than 4 hours, and then more like 60 to 90 for greater than 4 hours. But you have to kind of figure that out for yourself and what you can actually tolerate.
Right. And one of the reasons that the longer events end up asking for more calories is that you've spent a lot more time having run out of the stores that you started with.
Yes.
Right. Like if you don't start your event energy depleted, then most people, in order to bonk, in order to really run out of energy, you need to get out to a little bit beyond 3 hours for most people. Mm-hmm. If you show up to the race sleep deprived and glycogen depleted and exhausted, you can bonk in a lot less than 3 hours. But most people, to really deplete their glycogen stores need a little more than 3 hours. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there are elite marathoners who, they're running 220 marathons or whatever. They'll just drink water at aid stations. they're not going to run out of their glycogen stores over the duration of their event. But they show up rested and fueled and hydrated, and that's not what we recommend for most
Sure.
people. I think the point is, the longer you go, the more time you're going to spend beyond the limits of the energy stores that you started your event.
And the higher intensity you're going, the faster you're going to burn through your carb stores.
Right.
Okay. And in terms of carbs too, it's also training your gut and practicing different things and figuring that out for yourself. Like you said, for you experiment with 200 calories is not enough. You get a little bit more, you feel better. So I think a big part of this is just, kind of figuring out what feels good for you and what you can tolerate, because obviously people have different sensitivities and tolerances to various products.
Yes, and I think, one of the questions you had asked me was about the interplay between fluid and electrolytes, or fluid and carbohydrates. And one example would be that the carbohydrates that are put into Tailwind, simple sugars like glucose and fructose, they actually help the absorption of water and sodium, because there are co-transporters that will bring, more than one of those things across your gut barrier. So the sodium is helping the absorption of the carbohydrate, and the carbohydrate is helping the absorption of sodium. And the same thing is true for water.
Let's talk about electrolytes a little bit, because everyone's always asking me about specific electrolyte needs and, do they need to take additional salt pills or this and that? And of course, sweat rates are very different. Electrolyte needs vary greatly from one individual to the next. So how do you view a product like this, which I love because it is much higher in sodium than a lot of products out there? But yeah, in terms of meeting individual electrolyte needs, and was there any rhyme and reason in addition to the interplay of the other nutrients and in determining the amounts that you put into the fuel?
So I think there's 4 electrolytes that are most relevant to endurance sports: sodium, potassium, calcium, and magnesium. Sodium you can think of as your hydration ion, because in your body, water follows sodium.
Mm-hmm.
To say anything intelligent about sodium, you really need to talk about it in the context of how much water you're drinking. It's helpful also to think of potassium in terms of how much water you're drinking, although potassium's more important for other cellular functions. And calcium's important for muscle function, and magnesium's important for muscle function because magnesium helps calcium.
Yeah.
But of all of those, it's really the sodium that I think is the most important to do correctly.
Mm-hmm.
The big picture is that your body will do the right thing with sodium and water if you let it. And the reason for this is that your kidneys, which are the main regulators of sodium, they're osmoregulators with a volume overload. So what that means is their first job is to keep your sodium in your blood, the concentration of your sodium, just right. And the kidneys will do that unless they begin to get stressed from a volume standpoint, either not enough or too much. So your kidneys will keep your sodium right as long as you give them enough water and enough sodium so that they aren't stressed. I think a lot of fuels out there do not have enough sodium. Tailwind has more sodium than most, and we could have put more sodium in Tailwind, but I wouldn't use less. We do believe that if you are fueling off of Tailwind, that you don't need to take extra salt tablets. We've got the right amount of sodium in it for you, so we've sorted all that out for you.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely have some clients that do feel like they need additional salt, or they play around with additional salt, but I always caution them, if they're using Tailwind as instructed, to just be careful with that. Obviously, we don't want to oversalt somebody. What kind of kept you back from putting in more salt?
Well, if you put too much salt in something, it just tastes way too salty.
Yeah, no, I love the taste. I think it's a good balance, because there are other products out there. Morton is one of them. I love their gels, but their drink is just very sweet. It's very one-dimensional tasting. And that's why I prefer this product, because you can taste the salt, which is very satisfying when you're exercising. Let's talk about the logistics of using a product like Tailwind during training and racing. So you were saying that this could be all you take in, and some people certainly use it that way, but many people do use it in addition to other things, especially in an ultra event. I do have clients who use it for road marathons and, other types of races, although logistically it's a little bit trickier to carry, of course, as a powder and a drink versus just carrying gels and grabbing water at an aid station. In terms of like an ultra where there are aid stations with food and especially like multi-day events, you're getting hungry because, a liquid, I guess for something that's not super long, maybe that's enough, but at some point you may want some solid food too. How do you kind of see it playing into all of that?
Yeah, sometimes you want something else just for variety. For me, if I've been out there for hours, sometimes I just want to change things up because I feel like it. And I think it's an important point that Tailwind is designed to keep, your three issues, your hydration and your electrolytes and your fueling, to keep that tuned for you. But the assumption is that you're not eating or drinking anything else. So if you do start to add other stuff, sometimes Tailwind plus other food like gels or bars or a sandwich or whatever, that can be a little much for your stomach. So what I advise people is, what if you're on your ultra, you've been out for 3 hours and you've packed a really great sandwich, or you've got some bars or gels or whatever it is that you like. If you spend an hour fueling that way, during that time, I might just drink water. And then after you've washed down, say it's a really nice turkey and pesto sandwich or whatever it is you've brought to be out there for hours.
That sounds fancy for an ultra, but yeah, that's awesome.
You want to pamper yourself, right?
Sure.
But after you've had some water after your food, give yourself 20 minutes or so to digest that, and then you can go back to Tailwind for a while. Because food is loaded with sodium. Normally, just throughout the course of your day, you're eating food and you're drinking water, and there's tons of sodium in food, and you have kidneys, and they sort it all out. The reason that you have to start to be careful about how much sodium are you adding is when you're drinking all your calories. If you're just drinking calories, then where's your sodium from? Then you want to start being careful about how much is there.
And speaking of drinking calories, what was kind of the logic behind a solely liquid product versus more of a gel or a chew or a bar? Because all like your two products are powder mixed into liquid. So yeah, how do you feel about that versus solids? Is it just like a digestion thing? It's easier on the gut? Is that the reasoning behind it?
It's easier on the gut. If you're just drinking, you have to hydrate anyway. Mm-hmm. When you're exercising, your body's shifting a lot of the blood flow that would go to your guts to your muscles. So almost everything that your GI system does gets compromised a little bit when you start to exercise. So the best way to fuel and hydrate when you're exercising is to ask the question, what can I eat and drink that asks my GI system to do the least amount of work possible? Because the more work you ask it to do, the greater risk you are for some sort of GI distress.
Sure.
And if you are drinking all of your calories and electrolytes, it's just easier.
Yeah.
On your body.
And it really just also goes back down to the individual. Like I work with a lot of people who do Ironman, and maybe you can speak to this a bit from your own Ironman experience. I have a lot of people who are doing Tailwind, but they are also taking in, some food and some other stuff. And some people can tolerate that. What was your kind of strategy in your own Ironman? I don't know how long ago that was, if Tailwind was even created or what.
Back in those days, I also made my own energy drink.
Oh, really?
I designed it from a medical science standpoint. Jeff came at the science of Tailwind from more of a sweat replacement standpoint. What was always fascinating to me way back when is we came up with pretty much the same numbers. So I did a bunch of my own designed drink. I think what they were handing out on the course was something I didn't like very much. So at all of the aid stations on the bike, you could have little drop bags, and I kept myself fueled with my own stuff. But I also mixed some sandwiches and water in there, just because sometimes you want to change it up.
Yeah, and that's often why, with my clients, I'm not saying just do sports drink for, hours and hours on end. Like if you're on the bike for 5, 6, 7, however many hours, and then you're going to be running a marathon, it's just you want a little something different. Let's talk about caffeine for a second, because I know some of your the Tailwind products have caffeine. And again, I'm looking at another stick pack here, and it says 70 milligrams per packet. Again, how did you come to that number? Maybe we can take this as an opportunity to talk about caffeine as an ergogenic aid, what your thoughts are on incorporating caffeine, especially in these longer events.
The big picture is that caffeine is a little bit of a performance enhancer if you take enough of it. There are studies out there that show you can increase the performance of Nordic skiers, for example, if you give them a lot of caffeine. It's a fair amount to really, like if you want 2 or 3% better time, you got to take enough caffeine that it's going to make you start to pee a lot also. So you could debate about whether or not that's really worth it. Caffeine does aid the part of your metabolism that helps with exercise. It has the same second messenger as glucagon. Mm-hmm. So it is a little bit of a performance enhancer. And also it can just some people really like the feel of it when they're exercising. So half of our Tailwind flavors have caffeine in them and half of them don't. I think the most requested flavor that we don't carry is caffeinated naked. We get more requests for that than any other flavor that we don't have.
And why don't you make that one?
We've got 8 flavors.
Yeah.
The new cola flavor that we just came out with.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't drink soda, just sort of on general principles. I love that flavor. My wife thinks it's like the greatest ever. Different flavors speak to different people. Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting how that all plays out.
And for the caffeinated products, is that meant to be used alternating caffeinated and non-caffeinated, or caffeinated all day? Like, at what point are you reaching too much caffeine?
70 milligrams of caffeine over an hour is not a ton of caffeine.
But if you're doing that for hours on end, at what point do you need to stop?
That's one of the reasons we picked that, is so that, if you're someone who just really loves caffeine and you want to just keep on doing it, it isn't too much.
Okay. So people could, in theory, just, for a 100-mile event or 50-mile or whatever, do 70 milligrams an hour and be fine, assuming that their tolerance is okay for it and it's not messing up with their GI or anything.
Right. We don't put any warning labels on the caffeinated, like, stop after 4 hours.
Yeah.
We do unofficially suggest to people that, after a couple hours of a caffeinated one, switch to a non-caffeinated one.
Yeah.
But there's no hard medical reason for that.
Got it.
I think you would want to switch up flavors just to switch up a flavor after a while.
Yeah. I mean, I know with my clients who are running the marathon, for instance, so, and they're usually doing more of a gel. Again, I have a couple clients who do Tailwind, but they're usually more of a gel, and they'll kind of do some caffeinated gels and some uncaffeinated gels. And of course it takes caffeine, 30 to 60 minutes to even get into the system. So, I'm usually telling them, like, don't take it like 20 minutes from the end thinking that's going to give you this huge advantage. But yeah, let's talk about Rebuild now. So this is kind of like your baby, right?
That's my baby.
It's your baby. And it sounds like you have been toying with creating products for a while. So even before Rebuild. So yeah, talk to us about the composition of this recovery drink, how you chose the ingredients you did, why 10 grams of protein, why from the specific sources, etc.
One of the pillars of Rebuild is that it is a perfectly complete protein. And so maybe just a quick review of what a complete protein is. There are, depending on how you count, about 18 or 20 amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein. 9 of these are considered to be essential or indispensable. And the reason they're called essential is your body can't make them. And in order to build muscle or to build pretty much any protein, there is sort of a recipe for these essential amino acids. They want to be in a certain ratio relative to each other. And if you have a protein of the 9 essential amino acids with just the right recipe, then that's called a complete protein. And that's what your body actually uses to build muscle or really to build anything else. And if you had a whole lot of excess of one or two or three of them, that excess wouldn't get used. It would get burned as energy or stored as fuel. It's only the complete protein that gets used. If you're going to bake two cakes, one today and one tomorrow, you can't bake today's cake with butter and eggs and tomorrow's cake with flour and sugar. Both cakes need all the right ingredients in just the right amounts at the time that they're being baked. And it works the same way for your muscles and the 9 essential amino acids. You need all 9 in just the right amounts, or it's just not going to get used. That's what we've done with Tailwind. It's based off of a rice protein. And the reason I picked rice was that, in 20 years of pediatrics, I basically encountered about zero true rice allergy. I mean, rice allergy does exist. There's more of it in Korea, for example, where they eat a lot more rice. But in North America, to find a real rice allergy or rice protein intolerance, it's just vanishingly rare.
Yeah, that's often what they suggest for like kind of first foods for babies, rice cereal for that reason.
It's a super well tolerated protein. And so if you want a protein to put in your product and you just don't want anyone to be allergic to it, rice is a great choice. Pea, for example, is not. It's in the same family as soybeans or peanuts. But rice is really great. However, the protein of rice is not very complete at all. So what we do with Rebuild is we take the 9 essential amino acids and we buff out the rice protein to make it perfectly complete. That's why there's, quote unquote, only 10 grams of protein in Rebuild. Is that 10 grams of protein is, you would need 20, actually almost 30 grams of a whey protein isolate or a soy protein to have the same muscle building efficacy as the 10 grams of perfectly complete protein in Rebuild.
Yeah, because that was one thing I was wondering, because guidelines and the research, you always hear 15 to 20 grams post-workout. I remember receiving this product and seeing the 10 grams and not really understanding the whole story behind it. So that's kind of the reasoning behind the 10. That makes sense.
That's correct. I mean, those recommendations you're seeing are good ones, and they're correct if you're using a much lower quality protein.
Got it.
So where that 20 grams comes from is that people have worked that out, and what they are actually working with, although it might not be obvious, is that's how much, say, whey protein isolate you need to get enough of the essential amino acids to make something happen.
What about real food? And we can talk a little bit about using a product like Rebuild versus having a meal or doing both, because sometimes obviously after a really big effort or race or whatnot, you're not hungry, and something like Rebuild is well tolerated, but you don't want like a huge sandwich or something. But what if you are able to have just a real meal right after? Talk to us a little bit about recovery generally and using real food versus a product like this.
Sure. Rebuild is not designed to be a replacement for real food. Rebuild is designed to be convenient so that you can get your recovery drink in the first 30 to 60, hopefully 30 minutes right after exercise, both for glycogen replacement, which is rebuilding your energy stores, and for the rebuilding of your protein, whether it's actin and myosin fibers for your skeletal muscle or mitochondria for, after endurance work. The sooner you get on it, the better. That's, I think, why Rebuild is so helpful, is that it gives you everything that you need for your body to get started on fixing things right there, and nothing's missing. If your workout ends in your kitchen, and you have a really nutritious lunch there, then just do that.
Or like some people will say like finish their workout and maybe they have a long drive or commute, or again, they want to just rest and shower for a bit and not eat right away. So something like this, doing it within that kind of window of recovery and then having a real meal an hour or two later is something like another strategy a lot of people use.
The intention is that within the first 30 minutes, you'll get down a serving of Rebuild, and then 2 hours later, you have a healthy meal.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about your nutrition. My understanding is that you follow a ketogenic style diet. You said you started that about a year ago, and you had mentioned that it was kind of from your own curiosity or a research standpoint, since you are kind of director of research, of course, for Tailwind. And you said many of your athletes that you encountered were following kind of this more fat adapted approach. So talk to me a little bit about how you kind of got into this and what your thoughts are about eating in a low carb, high fat way.
I guess as background, the type of food that I've always thought was best was natural food. My mom was into natural organic food long before it was in. That's how I grew up. As a physician, I really came to like what or I guess Lauren Cordain would call the paleo diet, because I think that's sort of the purest form of natural food. Natural being defined as it hasn't been changed by man. That's my metric for if I'm looking at some food and trying to decide whether it's healthy or not. The real question I'm asking is this food available in nature or has man changed it? Because it's pretty hard to process or change food without increasing its glycemic index or making it unhealthy in some other way. And if you want to be a real purist about it, you could argue that from the standpoint of evolution and how long we evolved in conjunction with our food, you could argue that agriculture and the domestication of animals is a relatively new development. And you could argue that that counts as being changed by man. It was always interesting to me as a physician that sometimes foods can make your patients ill in one form or another. And it's almost always the post-agriculture foods that do that.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was being a purist about it, I think the healthiest stuff is basically hunter-gatherer type food, which basically means your carbohydrates are coming from fruits and vegetables, and your protein from meat and fish.
Mm-hmm.
After starting at Tailwind, as the director of research and development, there is a segment of the ultra runner population that follows a quote unquote ketogenic diet. As the research guy, I decided to do some research and look into it.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that was trying the diet for myself. And that was about a year and a half ago. I'm still doing it. I like it. I think it has some nice health benefits.
What would those health benefits be?
I think for an endurance athlete, probably the most compelling reason to spend some time on the ketogenic diet is that, as we know from Jeff Volek's FASTER study, that you can roughly double the rate at which you can obtain energy from fat.
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's important to point out, though, that fat and ketones are not as powerful an energy source as carbohydrates.
Yeah.
So if you have two keto athletes, and I guess when I say keto athlete, I mean, someone who practices quote unquote nutritional ketosis, which I would define as a finger stick beta hydroxybutyrate between 0.5 and 3 millimolar. There's a lot of definitions of keto diet. That's the one I would use.
Okay.
So if you've got two keto athletes, who are quote unquote running off fat, and they both go run an ultra race, but one of them decides to drink some carbohydrate, to drink some Tailwind or whatever during the race, the one who drinks the carbohydrate is going to win.
Absolutely, yeah.
Both of them have improved their ability to obtain energy from fat, but per liter of oxygen consumed, carbohydrates are simply more powerful. So they're sort of like rocket fuel to the keto athlete. I think the keto athletes who win competitions do most of their training without carbs, but when race day comes, they actually use a fair amount of carbohydrate.
Yeah, and that's exactly what, I mentioned that I interviewed an ultra runner recently who is a low carb, high fat or ketogenic athlete. And that's basically what he said, that in his events, I mean, he's pretty much almost exclusively using carbohydrates. I mean, with some other stuff, but mostly using carbohydrates. And that's what gives him a good edge. So it's more about the strategic use of carbohydrates and knowing the timing and how to kind of structure the style of eating and doing it in a very smart and specific way than just like randomly being like, I'm not going to eat carbs anymore, which is, I think, what a lot of people have this misconception of the ketogenic diet as just eliminating all carbs all the time.
Right, and the ketogenic weightlifters have figured this out also. They realize that when they're in ketosis, they can't lift quite the weight that they can if they had some carbs on board. They
Yeah.
like the lifestyle, they like the training, they spend most of their time as keto athletes. But if they had a weightlifting competition, they'd eat carbs for it.
Yeah.
I experienced that myself. I tried a kayak race one year, in ketosis. And, this is an event that's 90 seconds long and it's all about speed and power and accuracy. And I've never had such a bad race. Um, so I've learned that, when I'm going to do a 90-second whitewater slalom course, if I want to be on my game, I need to have had some carbs.
Sure. So Tailwind then for an athlete like this would be used more in the context of either higher intensity training or a race environment. And then Rebuild, you sent me a blog post you did for Tailwind at one point, and you were talking about how Rebuild, if used in a correct way, doesn't necessarily knock you out of ketosis. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Rebuild has 42 grams of carbs in it, and a keto athlete would consider that to be a pretty big fraction of the amount of carbs that they want to eat all day.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm explaining in my blog is that if you have just worked out, your body works very differently during and after exercise. And so at that time, those carbs are just going to replace your glycogen and turn on the machinery that rebuilds your muscles. So an experiment I often do on myself is I'll wake up in ketosis. I'll be in ketosis before a run of a couple hours. I'll go do the run, not really drinking a lot of carbs. And then at the end of my run, I'll check myself, still in ketosis, drink a Tailwind Rebuild with its 42 grams of carbs, and then check my blood once an hour for the rest of the day, and I never leave ketosis.
Mm.
I do think that our recovery product is a good recovery tool for the keto athlete, although I think that takes some explaining.
Yeah, no, absolutely. A couple more questions about the ketogenic diet, and then we'll move on. I work with a lot of people who are not ultra runners, and often people come to me being curious about the ketogenic diet for weight loss purposes mostly, but they are athletes, recreational athletes. They're maybe training for a marathon or shorter events, or they're cycling, or, just stuff like that, kind of 3 to 5 times a week, maybe 30 minutes to a couple hours. And the ketogenic diet, maybe they've tried it and, they don't have energy for it, or in the context of, again, shorter, but, a marathon is still a long event, but it's still fairly high intensity, especially when you're doing some of these runs. So how do you kind of do you feel like the ketogenic diet is appropriate for non-ultra athletes in any kind of context? But what are your thoughts on that?
I think a ketogenic diet could be appropriate for pretty much anybody. There are people who've lost enormous amount of weight on it. Whether your event is a 100-mile ultra run or, the 90-second whitewater race I just alluded to, for your actual competition, you will always do better if you put some carbs back into that. So elite ultra runners who are keto athletes, they will do roughly 200 calories per hour, and the really elite ones who are pushing hard can use almost as much as 300 of carbs per hour. So that's basically, Tailwind as recommended on the package
Yeah.
for your race day.
Yeah. My issue with it is when I see clients who are doing like more regular higher intensity work on like just like a more regular basis. So it's less of that like really long endurance stuff. Maybe they're only doing that once a week. And that's what's, I guess, hard about it. I mean, I think maybe the conclusion here, and as we were saying before, is it's not for everybody, and it can be hard to sustain for some people because food is so much more than fuel. Not everyone can follow the paleo diet even, and not everyone can or wants to eat as you define natural foods. That can be tough for many people. I think it's something that people can certainly experiment with, but it's just also being realistic about what you can follow for yourself and what makes sense for you. At least that's my take on it.
I agree with that. I mean, not everyone following a paleo diet is doing it for their sport. Some people do it to lose weight. It can be helpful for type 2 diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
I think in relation to sport, whether you're a distance athlete or a weightlifter or whatever the duration of your event is, this idea that from a ketogenic diet standpoint, most of your training is in ketosis, but then you use carbs for your competition. I think that's pretty helpful to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great hearing kind of your experience with it. So thanks for sharing that. So why don't we kind of wrap up with what's on the horizon for you? You're training for anything right now? Anything new and exciting going on at Tailwind that you're able to disclose, or maybe it's too secretive and you can't? Anything you can share?
Let's see. We have some very interesting stuff coming out that I actually can't disclose yet.
So stay tuned.
Right. I think, big picture, I think we, not to blow our own horn too much, but I think we have the best endurance fuel out there and also the best recovery drink out there. We're thinking about some next steps, but I can't talk about them yet.
Anything you're training for right now for yourself? Any kayak races or other events?
Yeah, I think I am going to, even though I'm really too old for the game. I think I'm going to go to U.S. team trials next spring and try to do as well as I can, duke it out with all the 25-year-olds.
Nice. Good for you. That's great. Awesome. So let's wrap this up with what I call my quick bites questions, and we'll just kind of rapid fire these to you. Favorite meal or snack when in a hurry?
When in a hurry, I like apples and cashew butter.
Yum. Favorite meal or snack when not in a hurry?
I like to cook Brussels sprouts and bacon.
And what's your favorite post-race meal or snack?
I need a Tailwind rebuild after almost every workout. I've become completely addicted to it.
And what do you usually eat afterwards?
If I had my choice, a kale salmon salad.
Sounds delicious. Biggest cooking catastrophe?
Biggest cooking catastrophe is I once tried to make meringues. I like to make meringues, and I was trying to put some other stuff in them, and they just completely lost all of their height and got flat and looked terrible.
Oh, that's so sad. I love meringues. So good.
So now I just follow the recipe.
Got it. How do you like your eggs cooked if you eat eggs?
Over easy.
If you drink, do you like wine, beer, or liquor?
Actually, don't drink.
What's your favorite beverage then? Other than Tailwind, of course.
I really like soda waters, carbonated waters. And someone gave us as a present a little machine that carbonates our own water. And that has saved my wife and I an enormous amount of money on LaCroix sodas.
Yes. Nice. Which carbs do you miss the most now that you are following a ketogenic style diet?
I eat them anyway. My favorite carb is chocolate, and every once in a while, I'll just eat a ton of it.
Yeah, nice. Top 3 items of gear that are most essential to your active lifestyle.
A kayak, a mountain bike, and a pair of skis.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Art, for coming on this. I think this was a really, really great discussion that we had, and I think a lot of people will learn a ton. So looking forward to seeing what Tailwind has in store for us next as well.
Thanks so much for having me.
And if anyone wants to get in touch with you, do you have a website? Are you on social media? Anything you kind of want to share there?
Yeah, just contact us on the Tailwind website.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thanks, Art. Have a good one.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And that wraps up my interview with Dr. Art Zemach of Tailwind Nutrition. If you haven't tried Tailwind products and you're curious to try them, I highly recommend it. I personally love them. And FYI, Tailwind is not at all sponsoring this episode. I just happen to really like the products. I'm part of their Trailblazer team, so I do receive free samples, but I've been using their stuff for years and really enjoyed talking to Art all about kind of the science behind the products, how the company was founded, and all that good stuff. It's a shame that Jeff couldn't join us, but hopefully he'll be on the show at another point. If you have any questions for me or for Art or anybody else, just shoot me an email, eatforendurance@gmail.com. All right, guys, until next time.